For my thoughts on all the latest happenings in the NFL in a completely relaxed, unscripted format, be sure to check out my channel, JG9 News. And now, on with our feature presentation. I want you to imagine this insane hypothetical scenario. This player right here is Denver Broncos quarterback Russell Wilson. By the time you're watching this video, he might not even be on the Broncos. He's selling his Denver mansion, the relationship between he and head coach Sean Payton has been less than stellar, and his 2 years there were unimpressive at best and disastrous at worst, to the point where people are calling this the greatest highway robbery of a trade since the Herschel Walker trade. Wilson is going to get released by the Broncos barring anything crazy, and is going to find himself playing football for a completely different team in 2024. Now, I want you to imagine that the Broncos actually don't mind Russell Wilson, and they have nothing against the man, but he just doesn't fit into their plans. At least, not yet. Because obviously, there's this scenario in 2024 where the Broncos are a good team, but their quarterback gets injured, and in a twist of fate, Russ would be the best option available on the roster. So Russ is granted his release from the Broncos and signs with another team, let's say the Pittsburgh Steelers. However, as part of the terms of his contract with the Steelers, in the month of December, the Broncos can recall him back to their team for 2 games of their choosing. The Broncos have a big game against a divisional opponent, and their quarterback might be unable to go. The Broncos can bring Russ back and then give him straight back to the Steelers. The Broncos have a game against the Steelers, so they figure the best way to hurt them is to take their starting quarterback from them. The Broncos can bring Russ back and then give him straight back to the Steelers. Obviously, a contract like this would be insane, and I'm going to take a wild guess and say that this is barred by the CBA, and that you're not allowed to do this. There's no such thing as a contract where a player goes to one team, and then you have the right to bring him back at random points whenever you deem necessary. Yes, there's a loan system in soccer, but that's a bit different. You're loaning out a player for a specific amount of time, so you lose that player for the entire year, or a 6-month period, or whatever it is in terms of the loan agreement. And even if the original team recalls the player and decides to end the loan period early, there are certain financial obligations that have to be given, and they can't just loan that player back out to that same team 1 game later. You're not recalling a player for the FA Cup and then sending him back out. And yes, we saw something like this with Gary Quazzo, the Minnesota Vikings quarterback who played for the New Orleans Saints for a bit, when the Vikings had the option to send him back to New Orleans if they were dissatisfied with him. You can learn more about that bizarre trade and that contract by clicking the card in the upper right corner. But this insane hypothetical that I talked about at the start of this video, involving the man you've been watching this whole time, well, a century ago, this was actually a thing. I kid you not. In 1923, the Green Bay Packers signed a player under these terms, and the story is absolutely insane and shows the absurdity of 1920s football that we need to take a deep dive into it today. Because this is the story behind Jan Murray, and what has to be, considering the circumstances, the strangest contract in not just the history of the Green Bay Packers, but in the history of the NFL. Before I go any further, as you might be able to expect based on the fact that we're talking about 1920s football, there are no videos available. So as much as I hate doing it because it feels very PowerPoint-like, we're relying on a lot of still images for the situations, the teams, and the players that we're talking about here. Having said that, if you like these 1920s styles videos, let me know in the comments down below, because I like doing them a lot, and it's something that we haven't really talked about on this channel before, minus a few videos here and there. It's something I definitely want to do a lot more of this offseason. Before I talk about the contract in question, we need some context to understand just who this man right here was. This is Jan Murray, and he is one of the most fascinating men to ever play in the NFL, especially back in the early 20s. He was a hometown hero in the city of Marinette, Wisconsin. He played some baseball as well. He would later serve as the city's mayor for 18 years, serving 9 terms in office. He was a heck of a football player according to all reports. And what might be my favorite story of all time, on December 26, 1923, he was attacked by a squirrel after trying to help his friend install a radio. 1 day later, on December 27th, it was reported that Murray did not, in fact, get attacked by a squirrel, and instead, it was someone else. I honestly don't even know what to say to that. Everything about that is amazing. In the middle of the 1922 season, after being on the Packers traded him to this team right here, the Racine Legion. For the Legion, this was their first season in the newly named National Football League, and they wanted some veteran leadership and some help on the line, so they decided to acquire Murray in exchange for Whitey Wooden. Wooden would become a great player for the Packers, as he would play with them until 1931 and would get inducted into the Packers Hall of Fame. But regardless, the Legion had their man that could hopefully carry them to a title. However, there was a problem for this man, Jam Murray, with playing for the Racine Legion. It wasn't an issue with management or anything like that, but rather a practical issue. Remember that back in the early 1920s, the money was not there in pro football. There's a reason that many of the top football players played college football and then did not continue their playing career after that. Players made way more money working actual jobs than playing football. Every player had a job in the offseason, and just about every player had a job during the season too. And for Murray, he had a pretty prestigious and high-paying job, for he was a lawyer, and from all accounts, a pretty good one at that. While he was playing professional football, he would be a practicing attorney, working on cases around the state of Wisconsin like he was certified to do. And this mattered, because this right here is the distance between Green Bay and Marinette, where he practiced. It's not too bad of a commute. Reports show that Murray had a car, so he made this commute via automobile and not by train. But you're looking at a 55-mile commute between the two cities. Is it ideal? Obviously not. I don't think a 55-mile commute is what anyone envisions as being a good commute, but it's doable, especially if you only have to do it a few times a week. If you want a comparison, it's the same as commuting from the middle of Long Island into Manhattan. Not a fun commute, but nothing too out of the ordinary. Now, let's compare that distance with the distance it takes to get from Marinette, where he was practicing, to Racine, where he was playing with the Legion. And yeah, you can see how this might be a bit of a problem. That commute is nearly 4 times as long. Whereas the Green Bay commute is 55 miles, this one is nearly 200 miles. And this was before we really had highways and interstates and whatnot, and before speed limits became relatively high numbers. So however long it would usually take to make that commute today, it was way longer back then. For some perspective on the distance between Marinette and Racine, it's the same distance as that between Jacksonville and Tampa Bay. So imagine if you lived in Duval County and had to commute for work every day to Tampa. That doesn't sound fun. That does not sound ideal. But with Murray, that was the conundrum that he was in. He loved playing pro football and was awfully good at it, but doing that with Racine would mean devoting less time to his firm. As a side note, I have no idea what happened to Jam Murray and his legal career in between 1920 and 1923. In 1920, when he started out, he was working at a firm in Milwaukee by the name of Cannon and Waldron. Now, Milwaukee is actually closer to Racine than it is to Green Bay, so it would have made a lot of sense for him to be on the Legion. It would have been the closest team. So if he was still there, odds are he never requests his release from the Legion to try and join the Packers to be closer to home. But by 1923, he was practicing in Marinette, which is closer to Green Bay than it is to Racine. He probably made the right call there, though, seeing as in 1923, Raymond Cannon, as in the top lawyer at the firm, was indicted on bribery charges and trying to bribe a district attorney with champagne in order to get a new trial. Which, you can't do that. I mean, I went to law school, I read this book front to cover, page to page and everything like that. But I don't need to read this book. You don't need to go to law school to know that, you can't do that. You can't bribe someone like that. It's not allowed. So Murray requested his release from the Legion, which made a ton of sense. It seemed like it was a situation like, you let me go, or I'm not playing pro football ever again. And whereas a lot of guys say that as leverage today to try and get a better contract, and you believe they're bluffing, and there's no way they don't play pro football again, this one seemed pretty legit considering everything we discussed so far. With that, the Legion let Murray go from his contract, and he rejoined the Green Bay Packers at the start of the 1923 season. And this meant that the Green Bay Packers essentially pulled off one of the biggest highway robberies in NFL history. There's no other way to say it. This was highway robbery. You're telling me the Packers got Whitey Wooden, a player who had played 10 seasons with the team, would help them win 3 championships in 1929, 1930, and 1931, would get inducted into their Hall of Fame, and all they had to give up was Jab Murray, and they would reacquire Murray the following season? I mean, there's no other way to say it. That's robbery. They had their cake, and they ate it too. Unbelievable stuff by their front office. And in a normal world, that would be the end of our story with these two teams right here, right? The Legion release Murray, the Packers acquire Murray, and that's the end of that. However, that was not the case here. Not at all. Because the Legion cried foul about this. They said, wait a second, time out. We're only doing this because it's a necessity for him. We obviously don't want to release Murray. He's a great football player. We're doing this because it's the only way he can play football and make a living. We're not letting him go that easily. Because as part of the terms with the new Green Bay contract, get ready for this, the Packers would have the rights to him for the entire season up until November 11th, 1923. After November 11th, the Legion could bring him back to their team for 2 games of their choosing. If the Legion needed him to help win some games and win the NFL title, or just to be a body in case there were injuries, they had every right to do that and steal him from Green Bay. This meant that there could have been a scenario where he was hopping back and forth on a week-to-week basis at the end of the season between the two teams. Now, you might be asking, why November 11th? That seems like a pretty arbitrary date. It seems like they just randomly picked that and drew a name out of a hat. Well, as you might be able to guess, the Packers played the Legion twice during that 1923 season, and the second of those meetings took place on, you guessed it, November 11th, which was won by the Packers 16-0. So the idea was that he could not go to the Legion and then have a conflict of interest with the Packers in terms of, do I try to win this game because it negatively impacts my actual team? Do I steal the plays? Do I know the plays? All those conflicts of interest were gone past November 11th. So that's why November 11th was chosen as the date after that 16-0 game between the Legion and the team behind me right here, the Green Bay Packers. If the second meeting took place on October 5th, odds are that's when the date would have been where the Legion could exercise that. If it was the final week of the season, I had no clue what would have happened. The contract would have been extremely interesting in that case. And the Legion were heavily incentivized to recall Murray. Did they have a shot at the title? Not at all. As you can see based on the standings here, by the time November 11th passed, they had lost 2 straight games. And with 3 games left in their season, they were 2-3-2 and had no shot to win at all, especially seeing as the Cannon Bulldogs were 6-0-1. So even if the Legion won out and the Bulldogs lost out, without factoring in the 11 other teams ahead of them in the standings, they couldn't catch them. But the Legion were dealing with injuries on their line, and seeing as Murray played the line, it made complete sense for them to recall him and fill that void. Plus, the Legion still had 2 home games left, and with Murray being a prominent athlete in the state, and with Murray giving you a better chance to win, having Murray on the team could increase your ticket revenue. So everything looked in order for Jab Murray to get recalled by the Legion as per the terms of the contract. Heck, their head coach even said as much, and said that Murray was getting recalled by the team. And an article even came out previewing that game between the Chicago Cardinals and the Legion, and it said the Legion had a good chance to win that game now that Murray was being brought into the lineup. Which raises the ultimate question. How did Murray play with the Legion? And if this all happened, why haven't we heard about this? And why don't we remember it as one of those weird oddities more than 100 years later? Well, that's because this story gets even crazier. Because as it turned out, the recall never happened. The Legion recalled Murray, and then the Packers said, wait a second. We've got injuries too. I know you're allowed to do this, and you have every right to do this, but we really don't want you to. In other words, the Packers played the "you've got problems, we've got problems too" card, and were hoping out of the kindness of their hearts that the Legion would not go through with this. Plus, the Packers were in the thick of things for the title hunt if enough things went their way. Entering Thanksgiving, they were 5-2-1 and had a shot to finish with the best winning percentage in the league. They had skin in the game in a way that the Legion did not. And the play actually worked. I am not kidding. The Legion, out of the kindness of their hearts, decided not to go through with this and change their minds so that Jam Murray could stay on the Packers and not have to play 2 more games with the Legion. He would stay with the Packers until the end of the 1924 season, where he would hang it up after being 32 years old and would continue his practice in law for a bit longer after that before becoming mayor of Marinette a few years later. Still, that is absolutely crazy. Here was a chance for the Legion to decimate their in-state rival, to do something that was perfectly legal, to get a player back that they thought they were going to have this entire time, and they just decided out of the kindness of their hearts not to do it. I mean, can you imagine the Cowboys and the Eagles working out a trade like this? The Cowboys being in the hunt for the division title, the Eagles having a chance to decimate them, and the Eagles saying, you know what, we're not going to go through with this. We feel too bad for you guys. I mean, that's insane. That is absolutely insane. Oh, and for what it's worth, the Legion did not need Jam Murray to defeat the Chicago Cardinals, as the Legion won that game by a final score of 10-4. Yep, you heard that right. 10-4. 2 safeties. Absolutely insane score. Just to recap everything that happened in this story involving this man right here. Murray plays for the Packers, gets traded to the Legion, then decides he can no longer play for the Legion because it interferes with his real job. So he requests his release from the Legion, he gets his release, he rejoins the Packers under the condition that the Legion can pick up his contract at random points throughout the season. The Legion have a chance to do that, and they go through with it before the Packers make a plea to them asking them not to do that because it would hurt them too much, and the Legion changed their minds and have a change of heart. And all of this was perfectly legal. If that doesn't sum up early 1920s football, I don't know what does. Because when it came to Jam Murray and the trade involved to get him, this was a jab to the heart for the Legion. Get your official Jaguar Gear 9 merchandise by going to jj9shop.com, and be sure to like and subscribe, as it really helps the channel out a lot. Join me every Wednesday night where we'll play NFL Trivia for cash prizes at 9 p.m. Eastern over on Twitch. To learn more about the history of college football, subscribe to Jaguar Gator 8. To learn more about the history of Major League Baseball, subscribe to Jaguar Gator 7. Also, special thanks to all of our Patreon supporters for helping out the channel. Your support is greatly appreciated. See how you can become a patron and request future video topics in the description below.